Hi everyone, and welcome back to Mary's Nest. Today, I'm going to share with you how I make homemade elderberry syrup. And the reason why I make this homemade is because it's a wonderful tonic to have on hand to not only fight colds and flus, but also to treat colds and flus once you have them. And it's really the star of the show because it's considered to have the highest antiviral properties when it comes to treating upper respiratory infections. Now, to make my homemade elderberry syrup, I start with dried elderberries, obviously, and I also use hibiscus flowers and rosehips. Both of these are very high in vitamin C, so I like to add those in for a little extra vitamin C boost. And then I also sweeten it up a little with raw honey, and this is some nice dark honey from here in the Texas Hill Country. Now I'm going to start by going over the amounts that I use of each of these, but you can also print out instructions for making this at my website, marysnest.com. But first of all, what I like to do is use 2 cups of elderberries, 1 cup of the hibiscus flowers, and 1 cup of the rosehips. Now the rosehips I have here are whole rosehips. Now you can buy them crushed. You can also buy them crushed and de-seeded. I like to use the entire rosehip and just crush it myself. It's more affordable to buy it whole like this unless you have a rose bush and you're collecting and drying your own. But if you buy it whole, it's more affordable, and then we can just, I'll show you what I do. We just crush it right here at home. And so I use a cup of this, and then regarding the honey, it's really just sweetening it to taste. So we'll do that when we get to that part. Well, let's get started. I'm going to bring you in closer so you can see exactly what I'm doing as I measure out the ingredients and get ready to make the syrup on my stove. Well, this is 1 cup of the dried elderberries, and then I'm going to put in another 1 cup. I guess I could just empty it with the half measure, but just for purposes of showing you here, it's just about, there we go. So, and another cup, so that's 2 cups of the dried elderberries. And now I'm just going to sneak these out of the way, and then I'm going to get the 1 cup of the rose hips. Not the rose hips, I said the wrong thing, the hibiscus flowers. Well, now I've got my cup of hibiscus flowers in there, so we're all set with that. I'm just going to put this to the side. And now we're going to deal with the rose hips. What I'm going to do is I'm going to take out a cup of these and I'm going to put them in a plastic bag and I'm going to crush them. Well, I've measured out my cup of rose hips, and now I'm going to take a mallet. I've put them in a plastic bag, and I'm just going to give them a good little hammering to break them up as best I can. Well, I've given these rose hips a good smashing, and now I'm just going to transfer them and add them into the pot in which I have my dried hibiscus leaves and my dried elderberries. So in go all those rose hips. Perfect. Okay. Now, the next thing that I'm going to do is add, I'm just going to turn back here and get my water. I'm going to add in 8 cups of water. And this is filtered water from my refrigerator that has a filter on it. And I'm just going to pour that all in. Perfect. And now I'm going to put this on the stove. Now I've poured in the water that I showed you, and now I've transferred this over to my stove, and I'm going to bring this up to a boil, and then once it comes to a boil, I'm going to turn it down to a simmer. And I just use an old wooden spoon here that, as you can see, it's quite dark from making this, but it comes in very handy. And one thing I want to mention is that some people will add different things to their syrups, and so you do have options. Some people will add echinacea, echinacea root, some people will add, and forgive my pronunciation, astragalus root, and things like that. And the reason is those help boost the immune system to fight whatever infection that you might have. Now, these berries in here have very strong antiviral properties and are already working to help you fight your cold. But also this can be a nice little tonic to take if you are around a lot of people who may have colds, or you want to try and lessen the symptoms of a cold you feel coming on. And the reason I don't add echinacea or astragalus root is those stimulate very strongly the immune system. And if I'm using this as more or less a tonic that I might be taking throughout the cold and flu season, I don't want to be stimulating my immune system the whole time because I don't want to overwork it and tire it out when it may not need to be overworked. You know, I might be just very healthy and not need that extra stimulation to my immune system. So that's why I don't add things like echinacea to this elderberry syrup. But you certainly can, and you could make a smaller amount that you could then use just at the onset of the cold or the flu, or during the cold and the flu, and I think that would probably be very appropriate. But for the time being, I just make it like this, and this way it works as a nice tonic throughout the cold and flu season. And I make another tonic, which I'm going to share with you later, where I put garlic, turmeric, and ginger in honey, and that's a wonderful tonic to take when you feel a cold and flu coming on, or during your illness. That'll definitely help lessen your symptoms. Well, I'm just going to bring this up to a boil, and then when it comes to a boil, I'm going to turn it down to a simmer, and then I'm going to let it simmer for about an hour or so. Well, I brought this up to a boil, and then I turned it down to low, and now I'm going to put the lid on, and I'm going to let it simmer just like this for about an hour. And then after an hour, we'll check on it, we'll take the lid off and check on it, and then I'll leave the lid off for maybe 10-15 minutes at the most, just to allow for a little bit of evaporation. And then we'll strain it, and then we'll put it back in the pot just to keep it warm. And we don't want it super hot or boiling or anything like that, because that's at the point where we're going to add the raw honey, and I don't want to overheat that, but I just want the elderberry syrup to be warm enough that the honey will liquefy and mix in nicely. So that'll be that. So I'll bring you back in about an hour. Well, I let my elderberries along with the rosehips and the hibiscus simmer for about an hour covered, and then I removed the cover and I just let it simmer for maybe about another 10 minutes or so, just for a little bit of evaporation, just to make it a little bit of a little thicker, but it's not, you know, you don't have to leave it to simmer uncovered too long. I just like to do it for a little bit, just force a habit too, I guess. So, and I enjoy the aroma, so I like to leave it to simmer for a little bit. It infuses the house with a lovely berry type fragrance. Alrighty, well now our next step is we're going to strain out all of the solids, and I'm just going to do that into this large measuring cup with a strainer on top, and I'm just going to try to be very careful about this. I actually think I'm going to go get a paper towel just so that I don't drip anything. I'm just going to move this closer for this first one to show you. And that's basically what I do. And I'm going to continue straining that. Now, do not discard this. I personally think there's still some nutrition left in this. So what I like to do is get out some of those plastic ice cube trays and put a clump of this in into the ice cube trays and let them freeze. And then what's fun to do is, let me just see if I can reach over and get this. I think it's all connected. It's all connected to my my other strainers. But I have this little tea ball, and you just put this in here, just open this up, put the little frozen elderberry, rosehip, and hibiscus leaf mixture in there, the little frozen one that you make, that you do in the ice cube tray, and then just close this, put this into a teacup, pour some water in, let it steep, and it makes a nice little tea, and you definitely get the flavor of the elderberries and the hibiscus and the rosehips. So I do think that it's worth not throwing out. And those of you who know me know I waste nothing. So I like to get every last little bit out of this mixture. Well, let me continue straining this, and then once we fill up this measuring cup and have all the solids strained out, I'll bring you back and I'll show you what the next step is. Well, I just moved this pot a little closer to my strainer, and I wanted to bring you back a little sooner than I had planned. I was going to wait until I had everything strained out, but then I thought you might actually like to see this process. So I just moved the pot a little closer to the strainer and measuring cup, and I also have a handy paper towel in case I get any drips, and that's because this is a very dark syrup, and I don't want it to stain anything. And so that's all you do. You just keep transferring this over, and I like to try to just press out as much of the liquid as I can, and I'll probably leave it to drip a little also for a few minutes, because I want it to be warm, but at the same time I do want it to cool down from the temperature it's at right now, because I am going to put raw honey in this, and I don't want the high temperature to damage any of the nice benefits that the raw honey has. But at the same time, I want it to be a little bit warm so that the honey liquefies and mixes up nicely with the syrup. Well, this is coming along nicely. I'm just going to continue to do this, and then we'll get all that in, and then we're going to transfer this back into this pot and add in the honey, and then we'll get ready to decant it. Well, I just wanted to show you what I did with the dried elderberries and the rosehips and the hibiscus flowers that had been simmering in the syrup that we made. I've just put them into ice cube trays, and then I'm going to pour a little filtered water over each one, and then I'm going to tuck that into my freezer, and then once they're frozen, I'm going to transfer them to a plastic bag, and then each time I want a little cup of tea that is made of these particular items, I'll just pop it in the little tea ball that I showed you and make the tea, and I'm all set. Well, I've let this cool down quite a bit, but it's still comfortably warm to the touch. So the honey will dissolve nicely in this. I don't feel I have to put it back in the pot and back on the stove. It's this Pyrex measuring cup has kept it quite warm, so I think it's going to work perfectly. And I just wanted to mention that we got 4 cups of syrup out of this, which is quite nice. We started with the 8 cups of water, and then everything that we put into it, simmered it, for about an hour, and then took the lid off and let it simmer for a little bit, about 10-15 minutes or so, and cook down a little just to make it a little thicker. And we have about 4 cups of syrup, so that's quite nice compared to really just a few ounces that you'd get buying a bottle in the store. Well, what I'm going to do now is sweeten this with a little honey, and I'm just going to kind of eyeball it. I recommend putting in about a cup of honey. And it's really not, this is very thick honey, by the way. This is from the Texas Hill Country, and it's just wild, raw honey. I'm just going to use my whisk to put it in, because I'm going to whisk it up. And so I'm just going to put in maybe about half of this jar. So about a half of the, about a cup. And that, I think, works well, because not only does it help sweeten this particular beverage, it also provides all the nice benefits that honey offers, which is excellent, when you have a cold, especially for your, healing your throat and your cough. I've read studies that, and maybe you have too, and you can mention it in the comments, that honey has actually been found to work better as a cough syrup than some of the over-counter ones. So that's quite nice to know. So I think that's good. That's about half that jar, so it's about a cup. So that's that's something good to know. Alrighty, well what I'm going to do is I'm just going to use my whisk. As I said, this is warm, and so I think the honey is going to dissolve quite nicely in it. And I'm just going to keep stirring this until I get all the honey dissolved. Well, now I'm going to get ready to decant this wonderful elderberry syrup now that the honey is all dissolved. And if you noticed, I just want to mention I've got burgundy colored dish towels, burgundy pot holders, because just in the event that some does spill a little, it's not like I'm using something that's white and it could stain it. So that's just a little tip if you're making this at home. And I hope you will make it. Well, I'm going to pour this batch, my first batch, I'm going to pour into this clear glass bottle. And this we'll start using relatively soon, because as I had mentioned, I think in the beginning, that I may not only take this if I feel a cold or flu coming on, or if I actually have a cold and flu, I may take it as a little tonic throughout the fall and the winter, just to give me a little extra special protection against getting colds and flus. So I'm going to fill this clear bottle, and then I'm going to label it and put it in my refrigerator in the front here. Now I have another refrigerator back in my laundry room, and the rest of the syrup I'm going to decant in these darker bottles just to help keep it fresher, and then I'll transfer that just to the clear bottle, so that I'll have in my front refrigerator. That'll be used up pretty quickly. So let's go ahead and decant this. There we go. Oh, isn't that just gorgeous? And I'm just going to kind of go right up to the neck. Perfect. Maybe a little bit more. There we go. Perfect. Okay. I'm going to put this lid on. And that's it. You're all set. You have a nice bit of elderberry syrup all ready for cold and flu season. For complete instructions on how to make this wonderful homemade elderberry syrup, please visit my website, marysnest.com. And if you like this video, I hope you'll give me a thumbs up and share it with your friends. And if you're interested in learning more about home remedies, natural living, cooking from scratch, and celebrating thrifting adventures, I hope that you'll subscribe to my channel. And if you do, please click on the little notification bell that'll let you know each time I upload a new video. Well, that's all for today, but I want to thank you so much for joining me, and I look forward to having you join me again right here in my Texas Hill Country kitchen. Love and God bless.